He's gonna die. He's gonna fight me. He's something like me. He thinks he's awesome.
Hey everyone, this is me, the Untitled Viking. I want to talk to you about this game. It is called Ignite. Now, Ignite is a fantastic deck building board game in which these cards that I have in my hand here will play a large factor into how the game is played. But also, you are actually going to have a very large board in which your units, it's kind of a skirmish level war game, your units, about 3, in some cases 5, will be moving about the board, doing battle with the other players that are playing, and also going to different markets to purchase new cards that will give you new abilities, new weapons, new spells, things like that that you'll be able to use to fight against the other players. So let me show you how the game is played. It is pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of explanation as far as how the game board's going to look, how you get the game set up, things like that, that I will touch on as well. And then we'll come back here and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, cool, let's do this. So this is Ignite. I'm going to be showing you how the game is played. Now before I dive on into that, I just want to talk about a couple quick things. One, the gameplay of this game is pretty straightforward, and that as far as the mechanisms go, this is a very strategic, tactical war game that has a fabulous deck building mentality built into it. To maneuver upon the board, you're going to use classic deck building mentality where you're drawing 6 cards, you're using those 6 cards how you will, and then you discard those cards at the end of your round, and then you draw another 6 cards into your hand. You will be starting with the same hand as your opponent, and as the game progresses, you will be purchasing more cards from a tableau of cards that are available. Now, that is just some of the cards that you're going to have access to. There are literally tons and tons of different cards. You can set this game up in so many different ways. And this is something I'm going to mention a lot as I talk about this game. Basically, the versatility of the different types of games that you can play is going to keep this one fresh, and it's going to keep it coming back to the table. This is, I set up as a 2-player game just for the ease of setting up the game and for being able to show it to you on the camera. Though this game is fabulous as a multiplayer, 3, 4 players, with 4 players playing two teams of 2 against each other, and plus there's other methods of playing the game, like there's King of the Hill, and there's Last Man Standing, all kinds of stuff like that, and I'll talk about those different modes of play in my conclusion. There are a bunch of these little tokens up here, and these tokens are going to be represented by different actions and different effects that are going to affect either the warriors that you're moving about on the board, but also the effects on the board itself. So I mean, you're going to see a lot of stuff as far as that goes. I'm probably not going to be able to show you everything, very little of it, but just know that there's a lot of different ways that you're going to be placing different tokens on the board for different effects at any given time, and it really works. I also know that the designer is planning on actually having miniatures for the game. So whereas this is a prototype and I have cardboard discs or cardboard squares, works perfectly fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what I had. I was able to enjoy the game a great deal, but obviously cool miniatures make obviously the game look really cool, and the immersion of the game increases when you have cool stuff to be messing around with. I just for classic text, I just took a dwarf, the dwarf race versus the elves. Classic confrontation. Though there are tons of other races that you can pick from, and not just your standard. Oh, okay, hey, orcs and goblins and whatever. I mean, there's cool things you have these centaurs. There's even this really appealed to my Skaven Warhammer mentality. There's the rat men you can pick. Lizard men or whatever. Stuff like that. Stuff to keep in mind. And the cool thing is at the beginning of the game, you will determine who gets to pick their race first, and each of the races have their own special abilities and powers too. So it'll affect. It isn't just a name. Dwarves do extra damage in combat if their attacks aren't blocked. Elves get to have a bonus to their range when they're using ranged weapons, stuff like that. Lizard men can survive on volcanoes. So there's stuff like that that just makes sense, and the rat men, they get to start with more people out there, but they have less hit points. So cool stuff like that to keep in mind as the game is played. All right. So just, one last thing. This is like a puzzle board that gets set up. As you notice, I just moved that. These pieces are like put on the board and they're set up randomly. And also, let me grab a big stack of them over here. These pieces themselves have two different sides, so you can have, you can play on either side, depending upon, like, if you want like these little toxic pools and more volcanoes, and either side is like more like, if you play with the advanced side, obviously you're going to have more effects that are going to affect the game as you play. Something that is, once again, a really cool way about how you can play the game and change up the game and how it is played and keep the game fresh and keep it coming back to your table. As you may have noticed, there are several different, like, you can see, like, there's this battle area in the middle, and there's, like, what's called the village that surrounds the battle area. This is really important. The village, like, normally when you play a deck building game, like, oh, I'm gonna buy something this turn. Like, like, if you played other deck building games, like, oh, I get one buy, so I get to buy, this other card, I'm gonna add it to my hand. Something that's very, very typical of all deck building games. However, in this game, you have to have a unit in the village to actually go along with the buy. And for each unit that you have, you can process a different buy for each unit. Now, in a two-player game, it's a smaller board, and so you just have the battle area in the middle, and you have the village on the outside. In a four-player or more game, you actually get these little tiles here that you'll set in the middle of the board, and you might not be able to see them. There you go. Real carefully. These are just market tiles, and so these will be in the center of the board, and this is actually a cool way to play the game when you have more players, because everybody's going to be racing to the middle of the board to take advantage of that market, but of course then you're allowing yourself to be out there, to be attacked, to get in trouble, what have you. So there's all kinds of cool, like, different aspects as far as that is concerned. Just, cool things. It isn't just like the different effects or whatever. Obviously, I talked about, like, the lava. If you end up in lava, if you're not a lizard man, it's going to kill you. And there's different things that'll push your units back and stuff like that, so something to keep in mind. But there's other things too, like, stuff doesn't really affect your movement so much, but what it does do, it has different effects. Obviously, grassland's nothing. It's just, fine what it is. Forest, if you're in the forest, it's tough for people to shoot you. So, like, they have to use either an area effect spell or an area effect card, I should more likely, or better accurate description. But most spells, area effect, yeah. But anyway, so to affect you in there. If you can actually set fire to a forest. That's what, like, these little fire cards are. So, like, if you have a fire effect, like a fireball or a meteor swarm or something like that, that attacks somebody that's in a fire thing, you can actually set that on fire, and that's going to be damaging and difficult. It doesn't ever burn down the forest per se, but it is an effect. The water is kind of cool. You can water effect doesn't slow down your movement at all, but if, like, there's certain effects like lightning effects, it'll affect everything that's in the water, obviously, because, the electricity, the water conducts the electricity. So cool little things like that. I mean, and the fact that, like, there's actually, normally when I play games like this, it doesn't actually go to that extra level. I've been playing a lot of war games lately. I've been playing a lot of miniatures game lately, and miniatures games tend to have a more involved, a more deeper rule set or for these little effects, and war games too. So I really like the fact that the designer actually was like, oh, like forest fires, that makes sense, right? Oh, electricity cast on water. So it's some of those things that can really affect what's going on as you play. All right, so I've been gabbing on and on about the game for a while. Haven't really showed you anything, and I apologize for that. So the game plays very simply. What you're going to do is you're going to have your starting deck of cards. As I said, you're going to draw. You're going to start with a hand of 6 cards. I have no idea what I'm going to get here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And with your starting hand of 6 cards, you're going to have different effects. So, like March, as you can see, it just gives you a movement that you have to go there. Here we have an old wooden shield. And the old wooden shield says, trash this card to block a weapon, projectile, or mount. This shield cannot shield bash. So, like, there's obviously, like, there's certain things that allow you to shield bash if you have a shield card. And taking a step back, there are lots of things, like the actual, like, card, or like the name of the card, or like the effect of the card comes into play a lot in this game. So, like, if you have a bow, it isn't always good just to have a bow. Not only do you need to have a bow, but you need to have an arrow in your hand as well to actually use that bow. So, like, stuff like that is important. But anyway, so, like, that you can see is, trash that. I already showed you a March. Did I get a dagger? Yeah, I got a dagger. So here you go. So this is dagger. So like dagger, you can see it has a range of 1, it has a damage of 1, and can be blocked by any weapon. And at the bottom you can see it says weapon, melee, blade, small, and all those things, depending upon other cards that you're going to have in your hand or your opponent's going to have in your hand, are going to take effect. Now the big thing here I want to point to this is in the top left of every hand card, there's going to be a little number there, and that's the honor of that card. The honor of the card is like what it's worth if you're going to turn it in for if you're going to turn it in for like to purchase something. So normally, let me just say, so like when you play your hand, like so you have these 6 cards, you could say, okay, I'm going to march, and you can say movement 1, march, and you can use multiple things, but movement is orthogonal. Like as you can, you know, just if you have 3, I'm going to use these 3 marching. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to march. So if I used, you play your cards one by one as you play them. So like if you just said, I'm going to march forward, you'd play out your 3 cards that you have in front of you, and you'd say, I'm marching 3, and then you'd show that. But if you wanted to, because people are like still in the village, you could have said, you know what, I'm not going to march. I'm not going to march that guy forward. I'm going to spend these 3 for honor so I can make a purchase, and I'm going to buy something that costs 3 that's in this like market over here. For example, like here's a card, and I'll show you right here. It has the triple sheath. It has a cost of 3, and it says draw 3 cards, put any melee weapons in your hand, discard the rest. So this is a way that you'd be able to get through a bunch of your cards and be able to like get set up for a turn. So, you know, if you've played deck building games, you that's pretty familiar to you. You know, it's like, hey, you know, pick a number of cards, or, you know, just things like that gives you little powers and activations. Now, whenever you buy something, as you well know, it doesn't go in your hand. It'll go into your discard pile, and it will get shuffled back into your deck, just like any other deck building game. I'm assuming. If you haven't played one, that's fine. I apologize if I'm assuming, but, you know, it's pretty straightforward as far as deck building games go. All right, and I'm just going to like show you some other cards as well, so you can see there's other cool things. So like here is like another different melee weapon. You can see it says flail, range 1, damage 1. Must trash 1 card from your hand to attack with this card. So you'd be like, well, that kind of stinks. Why would I want that? Well, as the game progresses, you're going to get, as with other deck building games, you're going to get bigger and better cards, and you don't want to have your hand gummed up with like old wooden shields and things like that. You don't want those in there. So having these cards available, like, oh, I'm going to attack you, and also I get to trash this. And as you know, or maybe not know, trash means the card isn't put in your discard pile. It's just eliminated. You get rid of it. You throw it out of the game, and it's just you don't get it back. That's what trashing a card does. Now, if you're in the market, remember those like you can go ahead. And you can also trash items out of your hand as part of a buy. So, like, it's considered like you're selling it, you know, to the merchants or whatever when you're doing a buy. Instead of actually just putting it down for honor, you don't get it double money. You don't get it for honor and also what is. But that's another way you can trash things out of your hand. It's like, oh, I want to get rid of this dagger card. It isn't, you know, boom, it's gone. I don't have to worry about it. It's not going to be in my hand anymore. So, other than that, like movement, as I said, pretty straightforward. You just move with it. Attacking is really, really also straightforward. Now, depending on, you know, so like if you want to do a range attack, so like you'd have to have, for example, like here you have, this is like a longbow and an arrow. So I can just show you, like, so it says longbow, range 2 to 4, and requires arrows. So if I wanted to use this, I'd actually have to have the arrow. Notice how the longbow doesn't have any damage on it. It doesn't do any damage unless you have an arrow. And there isn't only one type of arrow here, too. I mean, and there's tons of these cards, remember? I mean, for example, I mean, I'm just going to show you this. I mean, like, and this isn't even all of the cards. I mean, this is like a giant stack of the cards that I have for this game Ignite. I mean, that's like not even half of the cards that I got when this prototype was sent to me. So, I mean, oh my gosh, there's so many different things you can do. But anyway, regardless, so like here is like a fire arrow and does damage 1, shot out of a bow, so you need a bow to do it. But notice how it has its projectile spell and it's fire. Remember, like I said, like, you know, fire effects have different things fire effects will do. And then you have arrow, you know, damage 1, shot out of a bow. Now, here's one thing I wanted to show you. Like with a bow, it actually says range 2 to 4. So if you're right next to somebody, you can't use a bow. However, the elves have the ability to actually go ahead and use it right away. Like they have a range of 1. That's their special ability. But anyway, so like combat, like I'm just gonna grab an elf here, put it right there. Grab a dwarf here, put it right there, and let's say, well, like let's say I didn't do that buy and I moved 3, and you can't move diagonally and you can't attack diagonally. However, technically you can kind of shoot diagonally. So like if this dwarf was here, like your range is 2 to 4, you'd go 1, 2, 3, and you'd say, okay, that's within my range of 4. I can go ahead and shoot that dwarf. That would be totally an option for you as far as that. Even technically, I mean, yeah, it isn't, but you can't attack like this because I mean, look at it this way: range 1. It isn't in either there. So you'd have to go with that. But anyway, to attack, what you do is you just like play like I'm gonna attack, and you're going to do a damage of 1. Now, this is where, like, those old shields and other things that can block can come in handy. So, like, you'll see, like, the old wooden shield, trash this card to block a weapon. Now, a lot of the shields, basically what it is, this is the only time you can play, like, a card. Well, you play interrupts. You know, basically, if you have a card in your hand, and sometimes there'll be interrupt where you just have to reveal the card to show it, things like that. But the other player can throw, okay, bam, I have this old wooden shield, I'm going to block that attack, and so it doesn't work. It doesn't matter if you have an old wooden shield and, and like, it's like the big giant powerful weapon or whatever, as long as the keywords match, you can still block that particular thing. If you block damage, it's blocked. It's done. It didn't do any good, but you perhaps got a card out of somebody's hand. If the card works, like that dwarf, if that attack worked, you would do 1 point of damage and also 1 more because of the fact that the dwarf has the bonus of 1 to their attacks, things like that. So that's how attacks work. Now, so the game will like progress like this, like each person going through cards, buying stuff. I mean, and these games follow kind of a path where it's like you kind of move out a little bit to do some things. You kind of move, you move back to lick your wounds, maybe buy up some other cards. Maybe you leave one person back so you can make sure you're doing those buys or whatever. But you're going to maneuver around the board and going to attacks. Now, in a 2-player game, it's a lot more straightforward. However, when you start playing with like 4 players and everybody's against each other, you got to keep a watch on your back and make sure nobody's coming up. Obviously, like there's the game beyond the game of talking to people. Hey, don't attack me here. I want to attack you there. Let's go ahead and focus on this person. They look like they're pretty powerful. Whatever. Now, depending upon the type of game you're going to play, there's multiple different ways that you can end the game. You could just say last person standing, and then in which case, then it's just whoever's the last person that has units on the board. However, there are rules that basically state that even if like you are knocked out, if all your warriors get killed and removed from the board, you don't have to go with player elimination. There are rules for each person to basically have a little team of water elementals that are underpowered, but they're able to move them about the board to attack. I didn't play with that rule. I like player elimination, but people that don't like player elimination can do that. When you have the water elementals, you'll move them all around the board as normal. You can still do attacks, and you can still actually possibly win. It isn't just a king-making situation. Because when you kill somebody, let's say I did another point of damage to this elf, I take the elf and I put that elf in front of me as a trophy, meaning that I've claimed that particular creature. So if one player has 4 more trophies than any other player that's playing, and then you're playing a multiplayer, or even back and forth, with only 3 players, you're not going to have 4 or more. But if you're playing with multiple players, if you have 4 or more than anybody else, you are the winner of the game. And then also you can play with up to 8 people, which is a crazy game. I tried it once, and that was intense, and it took a while, but it was a lot of fun. If you have 8 players, if a single player just matches the number of, like 5, 6, 7, or 8, if you match the number of trophies to the players that are playing, so if in a 5-player game you have 5 trophies, you can be declared the winner as well. So that means, all going back to the fact that, like, even if all of your units get taken out of the game, you can still win by having these underpowered water elementals. You're gonna have to get lucky. You're gonna have to really pull out the stops as far as the strategy goes, but you can pull it off. So just something to keep in mind as far as the game is complete. Now, I just want to talk about some of the other stuff that you can like purchase or whatever. There's all kinds of different effects. Because this is a dynamic board. You're going to be doing different things, or you can like, there's ice walls that you can use to just set up. It's like place 3 ice wall tokens in a straight line with the middle token adjacent to your unit. Any unit gets pushed back 1 space and takes 1 damage. The ice wall then remains until the beginning of your next turn. So you can close things off, and that's that push back thing. If you can push somebody back into a lava flow, well, obviously that's going to be a good thing. You have like other upgraded movement things, movement cards like conditioning. So like you can actually move 1 or 2 with each conditioning that you have. This is actually really, really cool. The Meteor Strike. Secretly choose any space on the board at the beginning of your next turn. Any unit, item, or war machine on this space is destroyed. This attack cannot be blocked. So if you'll notice, there's like a 1 through 18 up there, and an A, B, C, D, all the to L, and obviously with the larger boards, they're going to keep going on those. When you have that, you would just be say, okay, like if I would say, 12F or F12 or whatever, however you want to say it, and then you would write that down on a piece of paper, and then you'd reveal it on your next turn. If anything happens to be in that spot, you'd be able to destroy that person in that particular area. And here, let me just show you like other weapons. Like here's the Gladiator Net, range 1 to 2. Target unit can't move until the beginning of your next turn. So this would be a really good combo with dropping a Meteor Swarm right on top of that particular thing. This is a game, as I said, with all the different cards, all the different races that you can play, all the different things that you can do to the battle board itself. It's going to be different every single time you play. And I know there's lots of games out there people say, oh, it's different every single time you play. And yeah, there is. But this has the added element of the fact that you're playing human opponents that are going to be actively trying to destroy you, actively trying to take you out. And when you add in that human chaos element to any game, the game just improves immeasurably. And it's one of those things where it gave me like the war game, miniature game feel without me having to set up my 1,000-point army and having my friend put his 1,000-point army together, then come over to my house, then we spend an hour setting it up, and then finally we play. No, I could be up and ready and rolling with this game in like 10 minutes and having a blast. But let me talk about that and more in my final thoughts. There we go. All right, so that was Ignite. Now, as I said, there's a lot more that is involved in the game that I didn't really touch on. Like that tableau of cards that I had set up, that was the suggested setup for your very first time of playing the game. Much like if you've played other deck building games where they said, use these cards for the first time you play. Now, I did that just so I can kind of show you some of the basic cards, but man, oh man, after we got done with that first game, me and my friends, we just started digging through the deck and finding cool looking stuff. Now, the rules themselves have very, very good suggestions as far as what cards you should be building, what kind of type of game. You don't want to get cards that are like iconoclastic from each other. You want cards that are going to have synergy so people can build up little strategies and ideas as the game is being played. Now, that being said, there is something really fun and awesome about doing something completely random and weird and just, taking the cards that you get and just having a blast. And we did do that a few times. Now, it made for really interesting games in certain ways, and sometimes we were like, that wasn't a good idea. But it was a pretty cool way to just, hey, let's just try this out and see what happens. Now, the big thing about this game that I really like, and I already mentioned it once, was the fact that I, in the last year and a half or so, have really started getting into miniatures wargaming. It's just something that, it was something that I always really wanted to be a part of when I was younger. Never really got into it, didn't have the time, didn't have, the income, I guess, is a good way of putting it, to really put forth, the process of actually having to build up armies and whatever. And just like anything else, it's more the lore and the idea of it than the actual playing. Comparatively, the amount of time that I've spent putting together Warhammer models and painting Warhammer models is almost infinitesimally more, or infinitesimally is small, infinitely more than the actual time I've done playing actual Warhammer. Now, that's okay, and that's all. I mean, it's part of my hobby. It's something that I really, really enjoy doing, and that's okay. But there is like that itch of like, oh, I want to like move dudes on a board, and I want to like actually put these things and have them fight and come up with good plans that are going to like take my opponent by surprise and pull off some really cool upsets and things like that. And these games, like this one here, Ignite, is something that's going to scratch that itch for me. As I said, there's this whole process of like, okay, hey, does Friday afternoon work for you? You want to come over to my house? Okay, make sure you bring all of your Space Marines. I got my Tyranids, and we go through that whole process. Okay, now let's set this thing up, and then we start playing, and but it's like this long afternoon. Now, if I want to scratch that itch of being able to like just play something war game mentality, it's so much better that like I can set the game like Ignite up and have that feeling. And I know if you've watched my channel before, I've kind of regaled against the idea of deck builders. And and I know like people like Richard Ham have definitely called me out on this when they're saying, it seems to me that this is a deck builder that you seem to like. And yes, I might have to take a step back and just say, you know what, I've often said, deck builders, but I don't know what it is. Maybe it is a renaissance for me recently. I've found myself being more open to them. I found myself being more inclined to enjoy it. I guess a straight deck builder just kind of leaves me like, ugh. There's nothing really going on. It's like I just can't just have cards and put cards down. I gotta have those cards that I'm grabbing like affect something. I gotta see a board. I gotta do stuff on that board that is tied in with the cards that are in my hand. And that is what Ignite does. Plus, it gives me a war game that I can play. A war game that I can play in so many different ways that it's just amazing. It's like, let's play with completely new races this time. Let's play with like a 4-player, 2-player team against her. Let's play King of the Hill. And the rules have all these different options that are available to you. So if you're looking for something that is a deck builder, and if you like deck builders, and if you're looking something that ties that mechanism in with a strategic and tactical way of playing a war game, I strongly suggest you take a look at Ignite, because it was something that I was a little unsure of. I mean, I liked the idea, and I should definitely talk about that the designer has put a lot of effort and thought into giving the world a rich background and a reason as to why these different races are battling it out right now, why there is this war going on between everyone, this turmoil and chaos that's going on. So that's another thing that I really, really like. I mean, it isn't just like, here, just fight. It is like, this is the reason why you're fighting. And I like it when a game goes through that process. So anyway, going back, if you like deck building, if you like having a tactical and strategic situation where you're going to like, affect a board, affect and have human interaction. Have like, it isn't just here, let me build my little deck building engine over here and watch me get these points. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make my deck building engine over here. I'm gonna trash cards. I'm gonna wean my deck, but I'm also gotta deal with the fact that this person's throwing meteor swarms at my head. Then I really think you're going to enjoy the heck out of Ignite. So there you go. If you have any questions about it, please ask away. I'll be happy to answer those as best as I can. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. Please, whoever you are, wherever you are, be the best possible version of you that you possibly can be. Remember, a smile costs nothing, and it might make the day for the person that you smile at. Be kind, be generous, be wonderful, and most of all, be awesome. I guarantee you that if you concentrate on doing that, you will feel better about the world, about yourself, and about, well, everything. Until next time, I am the Undead Viking telling you, you're awesome.